exploring the culture, the adventure, and the impact of martial arts. I'm your host, T.W. Smith. Welcome to Kung Fu Podcast. You are in the audience of some of the finest and sharpest martial artists in the world. People put in a great deal of sweat, a great deal of care, and attention into honing their craft. It's a cool winter morning now in North Carolina, and the Kung Fu students have been working on their Shurite, which is an extremely effective Chinese martial art. Abe Wesley is my number one student in the Shurite because of the principles of Shurite, which there are several that dictate a behavior. Abe was born to it. He's just took to it like a fish in the water. Jeff Burrell, who is also very good at it, has been training in it with numbers of years. And Steve D'Agostino has recently resurrected his practice. Most of the other students are either brushing it off, polishing it off, or they're just getting introduced to it. It's fantastic for helping develop good coordination, whether you want to use that into some other arts or to start drilling down into the Shurite itself. Shurite is the summation and processing of a variety of Shaolin Kung Fu. It's not very complicated, but it does require a commitment to the process. That also includes the code of behavior I was mentioning to earlier. It was the first art that the majority of Fort Bragg soldiers that I train with would usually learn. That was because within just a few months of vigorous training, you had an art and a little system of things that you could do and execute when you were deployed and engaged that would make you very effective in keeping yourself safe. Shurite is also pretty easy to just add weapons like chains, rifles, knives. You can change it from a long-range system to a close combat system. Very simple. It makes it extremely easy to learn a lot of things at once. Well, today we're going to be looking at old master of Shaolin Kung Fu and IronShirt Qigong. Most of my students start with the basis in IronShirt Qigong, whether they know it or not, which is counterintuitive in some ways when you hear the name because it has very little to do with external conditioning. It has to do mostly about strengthening oneself by starting over on the inside. Perhaps this is something I can put on the curriculum for the International Martial Arts Conference in June of 2026. You can find the link to that. Look up Troy Price or the Shurite Bujitsu Kai. Love to see you come there. It is a fantastic group of folks who come together literally from around the world. Also in the show notes, you're going to find a link to twsmith.us, and that is for Support a Dream. Too many kids would like to get involved in martial arts and don't have the resources. And I wanted to do something to help those identified kids who may want to come and participate and just can't because of their situations. And if they're identified by their instructor and approved by Troy, then you all are participating in allowing a future martial artist to be groomed and developed, and who knows, maybe one day lead the pack. Dear Sifu Smith, how are you doing? Hope all is okay with you, your family, and your students. My name's Antonio, and I write you from a city in the north of Italy. Nice to meet you. Please forgive me for my American language. I read by chance this post, which is at TibetanKungFu.net, Kung Fu blog, and it was on about Mar Sik. I read something about this Sifu in some websites and forums. Recently, I knew that there was an old article from the magazine called Official Karate, Fall 1973 edition, called Mar Sik, The Odyssey of a Kung Fu Master, written by David Cox. Can you help me find it? I was curious to read it. I know that San Francisco Bay Area Television Archive made available many videos about different topics. I found one about Kung Fu, but I don't know if the old man in the pic was Sifu Mar Sik. Hope you can help me. It would be great to read it. Take very good care. Ciao, Antonio. He sends me the link to the YouTube video that he was referring to. I'll put that in the show notes for you. I'll also put in the show notes for you, Antonio, or anyone else, an eBay link to that 1973 official karate magazine. Now, here's what I know about Sifu Mar Sik, because Sifu Mar Sik was Sifu Chen's Sifu, all right? And it's Sifu Chen had told us, and some of this is from his website, and some of it's just verbal from what he told me over the years, or a combination of both. Grandmaster Mar Sik was David Chen's first formal Sifu. David Chen began practicing with Mar Sik when he was 12 years old until he was about 19 years. Mar Sik had another disciple named Lucky Chan. Lucky Chan inherited the IronShirt Qigong from Mar Sik. Lucky was very low-key and doesn't like to show up in public much. Lucky and David Chen were Kung Fu brothers and would often spar together to exchange techniques and to improve their skills. Sifu Chen had told me several times how important Lucky was to his overall training through the years. As a good friend, and as the years would pass, they would train with other historically noted Chinese martial arts masters. We went by his diner when we were taking out a trip to Berkeley, California. Sifu was taking me out to do one of the first public push hands competitions that he had put students in. And during that time, we also did some round trips to his old stomping grounds. When it comes to Mar Sik, he was born on March 15th, 1876 in the Stockton Delta area. Sifu Chen had told me that he would mention the gold rush. Whenever he spoke about Mar Sik, there was always something to do about the gold rush and how it influenced where he lived, how his family was raised, and of course there was a lot of other political things happening to the Chinese at the time. When Mar Sik was a child, his parents sent him to Taishan County in Canton, China. He was around 7 years old when he learned Kung Fu from his uncle, Mar Lok, who had an alterations business. Before Mar Lok owned the alterations business, he was a Shaolin monk during the Qing dynasty. As a monk, Mar Lok killed a man in a challenge match. When he became a fugitive, he moved back to his hometown in Canton to blend into society. Mar Lok let his hair grow out, got rid of his monk's clothes, and began a different journey. Everything that Mar Sik learned was from his uncle Mar Lok. If you look at Mar Sik's movements, you can see the old-style Shaolin Kung Fu. As I mentioned earlier, there's a link in the show notes to one of his California exhibitions in 1959. On April 18, 1906, Mar Sik was in San Francisco and witnessed the catastrophic earthquake that registered 7.9 on the scale. It was the most significant earthquake in U.S. history, at least one of the top 2 or 3. The epicenter of the earthquake was near San Francisco, and the quake ruptured approximately 296 miles of the fault. The death toll was estimated to around 3,000 people. The homeless that was set out from the earthquake, over 250,000 residents. Buildings destroyed. Approximately 28,000 buildings were lost, covering about 4 square miles of the city. Death, destruction, fire, and displacement. This single event is what triggered so much of the Chinese movement from San Francisco to Oakland, which is later where I would spend a few nights periodically with Sifu Chen at his sister's house. Shortly after the earthquake, Mar Sik went to Stockton and worked as a Kung Fu Sifu for the Chinese Tong. Around that time, there were 2 guys fighting, and Mar Sik went to break it up. One of them turned on him, which is not uncommon in brawl fights, and Mar Sik struck the guy on top of the head and killed him. Mar Sik deeply regretted it and swore that he would never fight again. He was also wanted by the police now, and he escaped from Stockton and went to Reno, Nevada, and hid in a Chinese labor camp for 7 years. Thinking about it, and if you read anything about it, I don't know, prison, Chinese labor camp, I'm assuming he saw an upside to that. But man, After returning to San Francisco, he was invited again to be a Kung Fu Sifu for the Chinese Tong. One time he was visiting his friend's gambling house, and the place was raided by the police. They arrested him and thought him to be the owner of the gambling house. Mar Sik stood up for his friend and went to jail for 10 years. Because of his loyalty, he was a highly respected man in the Tong and Chinese community. Sifu Chen said that Mar Sik was respected in the Kung Fu all the years that he ever knew him and knew anything about him. Occasionally, Mar Sik would go to one of the martial arts events in the community, or for the Chinese New Year, which is similar to the video that Antonio sent the link to. When he would go to some of these tournaments, Sifu Chen would tell me he would put up this little wood pallet stand, and on the front he would hang a sign that said Kung Fu Repair Shop. David Chen was Mar Sik's disciple from 1955 till about 1962, when Mar Sik was 87 years old. Sifu Chen later told me that Mar Sik required him to pay him a bag of oranges and a carton of cigarettes each month. He would also tell me that whenever he showed up to train, Mar Sik was always working around his place, around his house. One day he comes in and Mar Sik's on top of this step ladder, and he's putting up sheetrock on the inside for part of a roof. He remembered it because Mar Sik was standing on the ladder, holding the sheetrock up with one hand and nailing it with the other. Mar Sik later introduced David Chen to the Tai Chi master Lao Yixing. This was when Chen was going to be moving to San Francisco from Stockton. This move for Sifu Chen to get from Stockton down to San Francisco was very important to us because it influenced almost everything now that we learned. Now the IronShirt Qigong, some of the Choli Foot, but this is where Sifu Chen is going to get introduced to Lao Yixing, and then later Sifu Ko, the Hop Gar Kung Fu, and Harry Ying. All that's going to happen down in San Francisco. So this was a significant move for us and what we will later learn from him. For many, many years later, Sifu Chen would hold his relationship with Mar Sik and Lucky Chan very close. I got to meet Lucky one time at a diner that he was running when we were down there, and I'm going to tell you, the man was just like he was described, very low-key. You would never know how much he actually knew. Mar Sik later passed away in 1973 at age 96. The interesting thing here is that he didn't die sick and ill. Mar Sik basically, Sifu Chen told me he had a birthday or something, and he wasn't very happy because he said that all my friends are gone. My purpose is done, and he starved himself to death. Lucky was taking Mar Sik to the hospital, and they were trying to put in IVs to hydrate him and keep him alive, and Mar Sik just kept pulling the IVs out so that he could die peacefully in the way that he wanted to do. Sifu Chen said that Mar Sik was the most memorable Kung Fu Sifu he ever had and the most compassionate person he ever met. Antonio, I hope you're doing well there in northern Italy. Thank you so much for writing in your question. Also, for all my students and people who I work with, gives you an idea of where our Kung Fu comes from and how you might want to use it. Thank you so much for joining me today and let me be part of your martial arts journey. I want you to have a great practice today, and don't forget to look into the show notes so that you can get the links and see some of the other things that we were talking about. I do hope that you'll support a dream and bring a kid to an international martial arts conference. I'm making nothing from this. It's totally just for the kids and who are identified as being in need but are putting forth the effort. Take care again. Have a great practice today.